The moon landing felt like science fiction. Colour TV was a luxury. And somehow, jelly came with meat inside. Your mum wore her first miniskirt. Your dad couldn't stop humming Yellow Submarine. And Mary Poppins made it look normal for cartoons to dance with real people. It wasn't just another decade. It was the moment the world started to shift. Music got louder, fashion got shorter, and young people began to realise they didn't have to live like their parents. In this video, we're looking back at 11 things you'll only understand if you grew up in the 60s. The sounds, the sights, the changes that hit like a lightning bolt and shaped an entire generation. Let's begin. Before the 60s, skirts were long, safe and expected. Then came Mary Quant, and suddenly hemlines rose and jaws dropped. The miniskirt wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a cultural earthquake. You didn't just notice it, you remembered exactly where you were when you first saw someone wearing one. On the bus, on the street, maybe even at school. It was bold, confident, and totally new. It made adults grumble and teenagers stare. The miniskirt said something no one dared say out loud. You don't need permission to be young, modern, or different. For a whole generation, it was the first sign that the rules were finally changing. It sounds odd now, but in the 60s, putting food inside jelly was all the rage. Meat, peas, boiled eggs, all suspended in a shimmering dome of aspic, proudly placed in the centre of the dinner table. It wasn't about taste, it was about appearance. The 60s were full of show-off dishes, and nothing said modern like cold lamb floating in savoury gelatin. You didn't have to like it, you just had to pretend you were impressed. Looking back, it was more of a science experiment than cuisine, but at the time, that jelly roast was the height of dinner party chic. And if your mum made one, you were expected to be grateful. There were horror films before it, sure, but nothing hit like Rosemarys Baby. It was eerie, slow, and quiet, and that made it even worse. By the time you realised what was happening, it was too late to look away. Mia Farrow's wide-eyed fear, the strange neighbours, the dreamlike music, it all crawled under your skin. It wasn't just about a demon baby. It was about trust, paranoia, and how something terrifying could hide inside something ordinary. It changed the way people saw horror forever. For teenagers in the late 60s, it wasn't just a movie, it was a turning point. One that made you afraid of apartments, lullabies, and the people next door. That Christmas in 1960, there was no bigger film. Swiss Family Robinson didn't just fill movie theatres. It filled the imaginations of every kid who dreamed of being shipwrecked on a tropical island, building tree houses and taming wild animals. It was pure adventure, with zebras, ostriches and pirates wrapped in a warm family story that made everyone want to grab a hammer and some rope and start their own jungle life. And even though it was up against titans like Psycho and Exodus, it quietly became the year's highest-grossing film, and a memory that stuck. People left the cinema pretending to be the older brother, or wishing they had a pet elephant. It was the kind of movie you talked about in the schoolyard, reenacted in the backyard, and carried with you for years. If you ever caught it on a Sunday matinee, you know that kind of magic doesn't come around often. Did you ever try building your own island fort after watching it? You didn't need to understand the lyrics. You didn't need to be into psychedelia. In 1966, everyone was singing about a yellow submarine like it was the national anthem of a new, weirder, happier world. Ringo Starr, usually the quiet one, suddenly became the voice of a global phenomenon that was silly on the surface, but packed with wild visuals, strange characters, and a deeper kind of freedom underneath. The chorus followed you everywhere, on the radio, at the playground, coming out of car windows. It slipped into classrooms, where teachers just gave up and let the kids hum it between lessons. It was impossible not to smile, not to sway a little, not to picture yourself floating through that underwater world of bright colours and blue meanies. She looked like no one else, thin as a pencil, with eyelashes like spider legs and eyes that stared straight through magazine covers. Twiggy wasn't just a model, she was a revolution. In a decade of change, she erased the old beauty standards with a stare and a shift dress. And overnight, girls everywhere wanted that pixie haircut, that eyeliner flick, that bold, boyish silhouette. Some cut her out of fashion pages and taped her to their walls. Others copied her makeup with shaky hands in front of foggy mirrors. Boys couldn't decide if she was real or a cartoon, but they were hooked. Twiggy wasn't trying to be sexy. She was fast, modern, untouchable. A symbol of a time when everything felt like it was speeding forward. Did your sister or cousin try to walk just like her down the street? You didn't just watch colour TV. You remember getting it. That moment when the picture flipped from grey to green grass, blue skies and red jackets in a cricket match was almost surreal. In 1966, when the BBC broadcast its first programmes in colour, it felt like the future had finally walked into your living room. But not everyone had one. Colour sets were expensive, and if your family got one early, your house became the gathering spot for every neighbour on the block. By 1968, when the official colour TV licence rolled out, people didn't complain about paying extra. They were too busy adjusting the antennas, dimming the lights, and gasping at the rich reds and glowing golds on screen. That first time you saw fireworks or a nature show in colour, it stuck with you. Do you remember which programme made you go, wow, the first time you saw it in colour? It arrived in 1961, but with a catch. The contraceptive pill was a medical breakthrough, yet only married women could get it. You had to prove you had a husband. You had to ask your doctor carefully. For years, it was hidden behind closed doors, quietly transforming lives one prescription at a time. It wasn't until 1967 that it finally became accessible to all women, and even then, the stigma lingered. For some, it was freedom. For others, a quiet rebellion. Women started to take control of their futures, of their bodies, of their choices, and society didn't always like it. But the conversation had started, and there was no going back. It started with 40 women and a simple demand: equal pay for equal work. In June 1968, the machinists at Ford's Dagenham plant, responsible for stitching together the car seat upholstery, walked off the job. They weren't asking for a favour. They were fighting a system that had labelled them unskilled, just so they could be paid less than men doing similar jobs. Their pay was 87% of what male colleagues earned. That 13%, 87%, there wasn't just a number, it was dignity denied. The strike lasted 3 grueling weeks. Production at Ford came to a halt. The government got nervous. Barbara Castle, Secretary of State for Employment and Productivity, was called in to negotiate. She was one of the few women in British politics at the time, and she knew this fight mattered. Thanks to the pressure these women created, a deal was struck to move their classification to semi-skilled with an immediate pay rise. But more importantly, their courage lit a fire. Just 2 years later, the Equal Pay Act of 1970 became law, marking a turning point in the battle for gender equality in the workplace. The Dagenham strike wasn't just a footnote, it was a catalyst. A reminder that sometimes the biggest changes come not from grand speeches, but from the rhythmic hum of sewing machines and the refusal to stay silent. Before Mary Poppins, movie magic was limited to camera tricks and stage illusions. But in 1964, Disney pushed the boundaries of imagination and technology like never before. The film combined live action with hand-drawn animation in ways that had never been done so seamlessly. Julie Andrews danced with cartoon penguins. Dick Van Dyke jumped into chalk landscapes. And London's skyline turned into a dream. The visual effects were so groundbreaking, they earned the film an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, beating out more traditional technical marvels of the time. The production used a process called sodium vapor projection, a forerunner of green screen. to blend animated elements with actors so naturally it felt real. For many kids, Mary Poppins was the first time cinema truly became a doorway to another world. And it wasn't just technical brilliance. The film's emotional tone, catchy songs, and whimsical spirit created a sense of wonder that stayed with you long after the credits rolled. It was the kind of movie you'd watch again just to catch details you missed the first time. The carousel horses that galloped off the merry-go-round, the talking umbrella, the chimney sweep dance on the rooftops. It wasn't just special effects, it was a spell. Do you remember watching it wide-eyed, wondering if your own umbrella might lift you into the clouds? Maybe it was a song, a dress, a chalk drawing on a grey pavement. Maybe it was the night the moon looked a little closer, or the moment your living room turned to colour for the very first time. Whatever it was, those memories stayed. Not because they were perfect, but because they were yours. The Britain of those years wasn't always kind or fair or bright, but even in the middle of power cuts, strikes and growing pains, something in that era shaped you. It taught you to dream big with Mary Poppins, to stand tall like the women at Ford, to laugh, to sing, to question. It was messy, yes, but unforgettable. So now we turn it over to you. What do you remember most from those years? Was it the music, the fashion, the fights for change? Tell us your story in the comments, because sometimes the smallest memory brings back the biggest feeling.